totally unexpected. Did HYBE just make the biggest mistake in BTS's career history? Jungkook seems unable to hide his regret, and just as the atmosphere becomes more tense, Taehyung sends a message that leaves everyone speechless. The message was not what anyone imagined. What's really going on behind the scenes? And is this the beginning of a crack in trust in the team? Who would have thought that a decision from an agency as big as HYBE could trigger such a huge storm? That question now resonates among ARMY and music industry watchers, especially after a recent video surfaced showing Jungkook's hard to explain face a mixture of disappointment, anger, and regret. It all started with a controversial move HYBE took a few days ago, a move that was touted as an attempt to adjust strategy to boost popularity, but instead caused a wave of uncontrollable negative reactions. However, what makes this situation even more heated is not just Jungkook's expression, but the mysterious message Taehyung sent right after the news broke. Did I ask this just a coincidence? Or is it just a signal? Why did Taehyung choose to write something that sounds so personal, yet is also full of hidden meaning? And why does Jungkook look like he's holding back something he can't say in front of the camera? Many wondered, was the message aimed at supporting Jungkook, or rather as a subtle but piercing form of reprimand? These questions spin wildly in the heads of the fans, making every little detail in their interactions analyzed down to the smallest point. According to an internal source who declined to be named, HYBE's decision involved a sudden change in the schedule and concept of a large project that had long been prepared. The decision, although in the eyes of management is considered a strategic step, does not seem to have gone through an adequate discussion process with the members. The result? There are disagreements that develop into deep disappointments, especially with Jungkook, who is known to be very perfectionist and has an emotional attachment to the project. For Jungkook, it's not just about work, it's about principle and integrity. As footage of Jungkook's reaction circulated on social media, ARMY began to notice that there was something more to it than the usual discontent. The look in his eyes, the way he took a deep breath before speaking, even the repeated movements of his hands clasping the chair as if holding something, all gave the impression that he was struggling with feelings that he wanted to hide. And in the midst of all that, came a message from Taehyung. The message isn't long, but that's where the power lies. You know, even a wrong decision can teach us the right way to go. Taehyung wrote in Korean, accompanied by a heart emoji and an asterisk. This seemingly simple sentence immediately gave rise to diverse interpretations. Is Taehyung trying to calm Jungkook down? Or is this a subtle satire implying that HYBE's decision was indeed wrong, and they should learn from the mistake? No one knows for sure, but one thing is clear. This message provoked heated discussions on fan forums around the world. Some fans thought that this was Taehyung's solidarity with Jungkook, a way of saying that he understood his colleagues' disappointment without directly offending the management. However, some read the message as a sign that Taehyung himself was dissatisfied with the decision and chose to convey it through diplomatic language. Meanwhile, HYBE's party still chose to remain silent, as if waiting for this storm to subside by itself, even though every hour that passed actually made rumors and speculation wilder. What makes this situation even more complicated is the fact that the project in question is not a small one. This is an international project that involves many parties, including major brands and global distribution networks. Changing the concept and direction of a project suddenly means changing months of hard work, and for Jungkook, who is known as a perfectionist, this can feel like erasing part of his own soul. Moreover, the decision was made when he was at the peak of physical and mental fatigue after a series of dense activities almost without breaks. Not a few fans are starting to question, is HYBE now too focused on business strategy to forget the emotional and creative side of the artists? Does global success make them forget that BTS is not just a product that can be arranged according to market trends, but a group of people who have complicated visions, feelings, and relationships with each other? These questions are not only relevant for ARMY, but also a highlight for industry observers who have long praised HYBE as an innovative and visionary agency. However, one thing that makes this story so touching is how Jungkook, despite looking disappointed, still tries to maintain his professionalism. He still smiles in front of the camera, still greets fans politely, and even jokes in between interviews, although his gaze tells a different story. This moment reminds many that behind the glitter of the stage, there is an inner struggle that is not always visible, and this is where Taehyung's role becomes interesting. The message, short but full of meaning, is like a red thread that connects unspoken emotions. Are you trying to kill Jungkook? Or is this a subtle way to protest HYBE without inciting outright controversy? No one knows for sure, but all agree that this moment will be one of the unforgettable chapters in the history of their journey. And no one can argue that BTS is one of the biggest phenomena in the entertainment world, and their every move is always under the global spotlight. However, precisely because of the magnitude of their influence, every decision taken, especially by an agency as large as HYBE, has far greater consequences than one can imagine. And this time, the decision has raised a fundamental question. Does HYBE really understand the hearts and minds of its members? Or are they now just looking at numbers, charts, and profits? When word of the sudden change in the big project began to spread, many initially thought it was just a minor issue. However, everything changed when footage of Jungkook's expression went viral on social media. Not a word came out of his mouth at that moment, just a long pause in the middle of the interview, a deep breath that sounded like a heavy burden, and a gaze that seemed to break through the camera, sending a message silently. ARMY, who had known him for many years, could immediately feel this was not just ordinary fatigue, it was a deep disappointment. Then, in the midst of that silence, Taehyung sends a message. Not in a boardroom, not on an official broadcast, but on a private platform that fans then quickly shared with the whole world. You know, even the wrong decision can teach us the right way to go. The sentences are simple, but for those who know the dynamics of BTS, the words are like a bomb that has just been dropped. Not because it strikes directly, but because it opens up a wide space for interpretation, making anyone who reads it wonder, is this an endorsement, satire, or even a warning? Some fans tried to dissect the message verbatim. They see the use of asterisks at the end of sentences as a symbol that Taehyung is emphasizing something important, but he cannot say explicitly. Some believe that the sign is a code that only the members understand, a kind of signal that something is not right behind the scenes. In fact, some international fan forums are starting to link this message to previous events, when Taehyung and Jungkook were seen having a serious discussion backstage after a big event. What made this situation even more dramatic was HYBE's silence. There was no clarification, no official explanation, not even a brief statement to calm the atmosphere. It's like they're letting rumors run wild, or maybe they're calculating the impact of every word they say. But in the world of social media, silence is not a safe option. Every second without explanation means giving greater space to speculations, theories, and accusations that are increasingly difficult to control. An internal source who previously leaked the news of the project changes said that in fact some members had expressed their disapproval long before the decision was announced. However, the voice sank amid meetings filled with arguments about target markets, release schedules, and cooperation contracts. Jungkook, who has always been known for providing creative input and being involved in production details, feels this move sacrifices his artistic vision for the sake of purely commercial interests. For a true artist, it is a wound that is not easy to heal, but on the other hand, Taehyung's message began to be perceived by some fans as a form of courage. He knew that the words would be read by millions. He knew that each of his letters could trigger a different interpretation, but he sent them anyway. Does this mean he wants to publicly show support for Jungkook? Or does he want to put pressure on management to realize that members are not machines that can be directed without consideration of feelings? In one old interview, Taehyung once said that he and Jungkook have their own way of understanding each other, sometimes without talking, sometimes through short messages that only they understand the meaning of. Perhaps this message is part of that secret language. What surprised many people was the news that the message sparked an internal discussion among BTS members themselves. Some reportedly felt the message needed to be explained so as not to be misinterpreted, while others argued that leaving it open would actually keep the public talking, and talking meant staying relevant in the spotlight. Does this mean that there are different views between them on how to deal with this crisis? If this is so, then this could be one of the most defining moments in the journey of this group. Meanwhile, support for Jungkook continued to flow. Armies from around the world are sending out messages, creating hashtags, and even organizing campaigns to show that they stand by his side. However, some are beginning to worry. Will this public pressure make HYBE back down? Or will it force them even more to defend the controversial decision in order to show their control? Until now, the mystery about the full content of BTS and HYBE's internal discussions has still not been revealed. But one thing is certain. This moment has opened a gap in the perfect image that has been presented to the public so far. Small cracks that, if not handled carefully, can widen into large cracks. And amid all this tension, one question continues to resonate in the minds of fans. Will Taehyung's short message be the beginning of a major change? Or is it a harbinger of an inevitable split? Behind the glitter of the stage and the smiles that were constantly maintained in front of the cameras, there was a closed room on the top floor of the HYBE building that night became the center of tension. There were no flashes of lights, no music playing, only the sound of tightly closed doors and cold gazes meeting each other. Sources familiar with the meeting described the atmosphere as too thick to breathe. The meeting was reportedly attended by several senior HYBE executives, BTS managers, and creative team representatives. But what makes it different is the presence of one of the member representatives who is asked to represent the voice of the group in this discussion. The name mentioned is present: Jungkook. It wasn't usual for HYBE to involve members directly in top-level strategic meetings, but this time, the urgency of the situation left them with no choice. According to an insider, the conversation began on a formal note. The executive explained that the sudden change in the project was done for the sake of matching global market trends and potential brand expansion into new segments. The words that sound neat on paper actually make the room feel cooler. Jungkook, who was sitting with his back straight and his hands locked in his lap, did not speak immediately. He just listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally frowning. When finally given the chance to speak, the source said he started off in a flat tone. "Are you really sure this is the right move?" The question is simple, but it actually makes the atmosphere of the meeting change drastically. There is no direct answer, just the sound of someone clearing their throat, trying to break the silence. One of the executives confirmed that all decisions were taken with the interests of the group as a whole in mind. However, it was at that point that Jungkook's tone of voice changed. He looked directly at the meeting leader and said, "Group interests? Or your interests?" Those words, according to witnesses, made some people in the room hold their breath. Never before had Jungkook uttered something so direct, let alone in a formal forum like this. What makes this moment even more interesting is the news that a few minutes after the meeting was over, Taehyung sent a message that later went viral. Does this mean that Taehyung already knows the contents of the meeting? Or did he get a brief message from Jungkook before deciding to send those double-meaning words? After the meeting, Jungkook reportedly did not go home immediately. He sat alone in the empty rehearsal room, staring at the floor as if looking for answers among the shadows of a lamp. One of the staff passing by said that he looked like he wanted to talk, but finally just let out a long sigh. A few hours later, a photo of him sitting in a black hoodie, a hat over his eyes, and a half-empty water bottle in hand began circulating on social media with the caption from fans, "He looks like he's carrying the weight of the world." On the other hand, HYBE has not yet released an official statement. Several media outlets tried to contact their spokesman, but received only a short answer. "We have no comment at the moment." A sentence that to the public